And tonight's guest is a very special guest. I tried holding on to him for as long as I could because there's a part of me that knew that the Clippers were going to make a run. And if anything, I was hoping that it would be because the Clippers were facing the Lakers. But since this is the first time the Clippers have ever made it to the Western Conference Finals, what better guest than to have than the Clippers voice for the radio broadcast, Noah Eagle. Noah, thank you for joining us here on Fear LA.
Guys, it's a pleasure. And Zach, you know this. We've discussed it. I was hoping it would be Clippers-Lakers. I think everybody in the basketball world was hoping that it'll be Clippers-Lakers. And I'm still holding out hope that eventually we are going to get the battle for LA legitimately, full health from both teams. It's going to happen because it's impossible for it not to happen at some point. We have been starved of it forever. So I'm looking forward to that day, but enjoying the run as we've got it now. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
First question, because it's so weird for me to be like talking to you like through Zoom, because I know this is so many times for pre-production where I have to splice it up and it's you talking to Ty Lue. So when I hear that, I know Ty Lue is getting a lot of flack from former Lakers, or like at least Robert Horry says, you know, he's the reason why I'm rooting for him. But for Ty Lue, after the Clippers won game 6 against the Utah Jazz, I heard him say like, hey, we're all in this together. This is a city. Do you think that it's important for the Laker fans to rally behind the Clippers, or do the Clippers like, we don't really care?
No, I think it's more so what he's saying is don't actively root against the Clippers, which is a hard thing to say. You know, it's a hard thing to say for anybody because I'm from New York. I'm from the New York area. And to ask me to not root against the Yankees as a Mets fan is difficult because that's the rival team. You know, anybody who's a rival team is always difficult. But his sentiment is probably correct in the sense you want to root for the city to succeed. But I would say the thought process behind it of a Laker fan going against the grain and rooting for the Clippers, it's just unlikely to happen. And I understand that. And I think the Clippers understand that. But more than anything, look, Ty Lue was great. It was a great piece for the Lakers when they won back-to-back titles in the early 2000s. They would go on to win a third without him. But his defense on Allen Iverson helped to swing that series against Philadelphia in a major way. And so I think in the back of his mind, I don't know because I haven't asked him about it yet, but I would assume in the back of his mind, he's thinking, you know, I'm sure that there are still Laker fans that like me and like what I did for the organization. So maybe me saying this might convince them at least a little bit to not put all of their force and all of their thought into what could go wrong for the Clippers. So I don't know. I haven't asked him. I would say it's tough to actually expect a Laker fan to especially a big time Laker fan to go, you know what? I'm just going to drop everything and root for the Clippers. But stranger things have happened. We just were in a full year in which I had to worry about where my next slice of toilet paper was coming from. So we don't know. Things are odd.
Well, it's funny you say that because we do have a diehard Laker fan in Mark Gonzales. So, Mark, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's funny when Ty said that. I was like, "Yeah, not going to happen. I'm sorry. We appreciate your time and your effort, and yeah, we still have that Allen Iverson picture of him stepping over you. But we respect you and we do admire him. But there's no possibility. Like I don't know if it's like the LA thing, like that old school gangster mentality, where it's like, you pick a side and that's that. But like it kind of is because as a Laker fan, I can't root for anybody. Which I'm so glad you said that because I understand what you being from New York, rooting or rooting for the Yankees. Totally get it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like when you're from a city that has multiple teams, you got to remember that Tyronn Lue is from Mexico, Missouri. They don't have necessarily a professional basketball organization there. So growing up, he was somebody that was a fan of the NBA to a certain degree, but he was focused on his own upbringing, his own basketball journey. And so I just think that he looks at it as, hey, we're still representing the city. And so as a result, you should still represent us. I don't think he looks at it as someone who was a diehard fan of a single team growing up as like, oh, I would never root for X. If you're a Yankee fan, I'll use that example. Yankees Red Sox is one of the greatest rivalries in the history of sports, or Duke North Carolina is one of the greatest rivalries in the history of sports. That might be a better one, given the fact that they're 8 miles apart. But if a Duke fan, if North Carolina gets bounced, I'd be shocked that a North Carolina fan would say, you know what, it's time to root for Duke now for the rest of this tournament. Like that's not going to happen. So I think the sentiment was probably it was a nice idea. It's just tough execution in this city.
Yeah, because I mean we're just very it's that battle mentality, and I get it. And as much as I want to see, I have a lot of friends that are Clippers fans, and I root for them. Like I totally root for them. I want them to know what it's like to win a championship. It's a great feeling. But at the same time, I really don't want the Clippers to win as a Laker fan, because it's like, what else? Well, that's the one thing that we always had against them. And it's going to be taken away. Just kind of like, LeBron not winning a ring for the longest time. It's like, okay, and then KD, it's like, okay. So yeah, we're petty, but that's like for me, at least, the most fun part about being a sports fan. So I don't know.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. That's what makes sports so enjoyable, is these battles, these inner going back and forth. I mean, I've got a friend who might be the biggest LeBron fan on the face of the earth. He's one of my best friends in the world. And every single conversation, somehow it goes back to LeBron. I'm like, so he's a teacher. I'm like, oh, how was school today? He goes, yeah, I taught the kids how LeBron was the only one to come back from a 3-1 deficit in the NBA Finals. The necessities. I go, dude, you teach health, and you teach like middle school health. You're supposed to be going into the sex ed stuff. He's like, well, of course. I mean, LeBron is a sexual being. I'm like, how does this all come into? But yeah, that's what makes sports so fun. It connects all of us in a variety of ways, and even the battles. I feel like I'm closer to people as a result. So I'm excited because I think that more than anything else, most people who are fans of a team, if their team loses, they're like, all right, I'll watch the game if I can. But Laker fans right now want to watch the Clipper games because they want to see if they're going to win or not. And so that's not a bad thing either. It's going to draw interest regardless.
And it's funny because with LeBron, going off of that point, like how many of the people around the country would just watch LeBron, not even the Lakers, but just LeBron, just so he can lose? Like they kind of have this 100%. Factor of like, oh, I want to see LeBron James lose, so I'm going to tune in.
Yeah, I think that LeBron is he's close to the most polarizing athlete of all time. He's definitely in the discussion for it. Tom Brady might be up there as well, at least in recent years. And you go back, all of the great players are polarizing. But LeBron, especially during the social media era, you could tangibly see it and physically see just how many people were on both sides of the bill. And so you're right, Zach. I think that a lot of people who don't like LeBron probably tune in just to see if he might lose. And I think Paul George has gotten a lot of that recently, the last couple of years. People want to see him fail more. Now, after he has failed time and time again, they want to see him do it again, because people want to see great figures be put down. They want to see all the people that can't do the things that we can't, like that can do the things we can't. They want to see them fail in the things that we fail in. And so I think that's just natural human tendencies, and people just like to see the greats get knocked. But at the other side, I think they're like my friend and like Laker fans right now, or even people from Cleveland. People from Cleveland are no longer going to be hating on LeBron. Maybe the first time he left, sure. But after he brought that title, he's immortalized forever there. Miami, I think people, sure, there might be some that are still upset about it, but for the most part, he brought them 2 championships. So there are still a large portion of people that are huge LeBron fans that are going to tune in to see him succeed. So you've got both sides of it. And I think that's what makes this Clipper run so great, is you've got both sides right now. You've got a portion of the Clipper fans in LA that are so excited, that are elated, that emotional as to what has happened now, and the fact that they have finally broken through to get to the conference finals. And then you've got the large portion of LA that are Laker fans that are tuning in to see whether or not this run is going to continue, and hoping that it does not. And look, either way, it's intrigue for the league, it's intrigue for the team, and we get to enjoy the ride.
Let's say real quick, let's say if the Clippers do win, and
okay.
They win the championship. Now, would you guys be okay with us having a parade, since we didn't get a parade last year? And so
wait, would you be okay with that? Is a better question.
Yeah, because we would be raining on your guys' parade, kind of, and that'd be hilarious.
Interesting. You see, I feel like, from my experience, I didn't think Laker fans would like that at all, because in theory, it would be a bigger parade for the Clippers. So, like, it would be more attention for the Clippers. So I feel like that would actually maybe even benefit us. I don't really know. I don't think that would happen. I don't think Jeannie Buss would want that to happen. I don't think Steve Ballmer would want that to happen. So they would plan accordingly.
Heck, even the Dodgers wouldn't. And the Dodgers would be like, we're still owed one too.
Yes. You want to do all 3 in one? That'd be a heck of a party. LA might burn if it happens, but
won't be the first.
Cool. Good point. It's a very good point.
During your previous answer, you mentioned Paul George, and I'm glad you brought him up, because you and Adam Oslin, who also does the pre, post, and halftime show for the Clippers, we've had him on, of course, here at Fairlay as well. You both have done an amazing job protecting him for PR purposes. And for somebody like Mark, and also like I have to say, for the time that I've been doing this podcast, we've been playing some of the stuff that Paul George has said since he came to the Clippers. And really, like in my case, I was like, it's kind of like leaving a poor taste in my mouth. But I've seen as like the season has gone on for his second time with the Clippers, he's really done a persuasive job kind of getting away and pushing away that pandemic P name that he attached from the bubble.
Yeah, I think he's matured a lot this season. This season in particular, he has matured. And I think when we talk about Paul, you have to keep in mind, if you ever actually get a chance to sit down and talk to him, he's actually one of the nicest guys you can talk to. And so none of it comes from a place of malice at the end of the day. A lot of it just comes from a place of, hey, this is in his mind in the moment, this is what he felt. And whether it's right or not, that's not for me to say. Let's put it that way. That's not for me to say. I've got my thoughts, as everybody does, but I think that this year has been a huge year for him in maturing, and a big reason for that's been Chauncey Billups. And I know that Laker fans still have a bad taste on Chauncey, what he did in 2004, and he's come to the Clippers, and he's been a huge, huge part of the success this year, and he's worked with Paul every single day. And he's basically coached him on, okay, not just in the game, but now in a post-game situation. Hey, maybe don't say this next time. Hey, give credit to this person when they deserve credit, or don't blame this person. Take the blame yourself as the star player. And he's learned, and you can see now his brain's working a little bit more when he's trying to answer some questions. I think he's done a great job, and he deserves a lot of credit for being willing to listen and being willing to change, because even at the All-Star break, to me, that was a turning point, because we all know what happened with him and Dame a couple of years ago. After he hit that big shot, he said, I don't care what anyone says, that's a bad shot. And that did not necessarily get taken very well, considering the circumstance and considering the fact that Damian Lillard has always been a deep ball shooter. Logo Lillard has been real. Then, of course, we have in the bubble last year where they're going back and forth, and he comments on the Instagram, well, you'll be going home this year, all that stuff. So him and Dame, either the first time that the Blazers and Clippers played this year or at All-Star break, they met up, and PG apologized and said, listen, man, I didn't mean that. I don't know where that was coming from, all that stuff. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Are we cool? Dame's like, yeah, we're cool, man. And then after the All-Star game, when Dame hit that shot to end it, Paul George said, unprompted, wasn't asked about it, he said, I guess that's not a bad shot anymore. I was wrong. It's not a bad shot. So he is now admitting, he's going back and admitting that he was wrong. That's maturity right there. That's a lot of maturity from a guy who I think a lot of people didn't expect to see that ever happen. And I even talking to someone close to him a couple of days ago before game one of this series, I had asked, I was like, does he just feel like a huge weight is off his shoulders the way he played at the end of the Jazz series? And the quote was, he actually feels like a gorilla is off his shoulders right now. And that's why I think he's playing so free. He feels like he's broken through to a certain degree, and now he's just playing with house money. And if he can keep playing the way he is, he's only helping to build his case even further.
Mark, has that changed your opinion about Paul George at all?
It's one of those things where I have noticed the maturity of him, at least this year, and I just didn't realize it was Chauncey Billups. I don't follow too closely with the Clippers, so that's kind of good to know. It's good to know that even no matter how old you are, you always still need a mentor, need somebody just to kind of guide you into either playing, saying, or just interacting. But if anything, I don't know. I still can't say I like the guy. As far as entertainment, personally, I got nothing against him. I mean, I'm sure he's a great guy, but as far as me being a Laker fan and watching it, of course, I just have to. Plus, he shafted us a couple times. So
yeah, no, look, I get it. I get it from a Lakers perspective, because I think all Laker fans expected Paul George to be in the purple and gold at some point. It felt like there were two legitimate chances where, okay, it's happening now, and then it didn't, and then okay, it's happening now, and then it didn't. So I completely understand that from a Laker perspective. But yeah, I think where people mix it up, and I'm glad you brought it up, Mark, is the fact that a lot of people will say, like, I just don't like him as a person. Like, no, you don't like him as a basketball player and as a soundbite. He's actually a great person when you just get to be around him a little bit. He's very nice. He's considerate. He tries to be inviting. So all those qualities off the court, he's always had them. Now, as mentioned, the maturity factor, and another example is right after Game 6. Someone asked him about how they came back and won the series. He said, well, all the credit goes to Tyronn Lue. Like, that's that's something that you may not have heard from him earlier in his career, but it's now how he starts to think, and he likes to defer away for other people. And that's great. That's what you want of your superstar.
I just want to take a second to hopefully like have a bridge between the Clippers and the Laker fans, and then just come together about their mutual hatred about Doc Rivers. How about Doc Rivers being eliminated from the second round against a very highly underdog team in the Atlanta Hawks? I mean, I think I've seen a lot of people, both the Lakers and Clippers Twitter, bond over that. And it's been a great show of jokes all the way around. But I just want to get your opinion on, what does the Clippers think about seeing Doc, unfortunately, I guess I would say from your point, unfortunately, be eliminated?
Yeah, I still love Doc. And when you get to be around him as well, he is one heck of a personality. And he was great to me. He was great to Brian Seaman, who was on the radio before me and now does the TV with the Clippers. And so it's tough to see the way everything transpired. And obviously it brings up a lot of memories back. Like all those memories from last year just start flooding right back. And I think that's what you're seeing from Clipper fans. And really, if Doc hadn't said, the thing that put him over the top with Clipper fans earlier this year was when he said, well, it's not going to be much different with Ty Lue, right? If he hadn't said that earlier in the year, I think that Clipper fans wouldn't necessarily be poking quite as tough. And then also the fact that most people were trying to make the argument, well, oh, it was just Trez, right? Or, oh, it was just Doc, right? Well, yeah, I guess clearly something was going on, because we've seen the shift between the two organizations, and we've seen the shift now with the Clippers getting through now, even without Kawhi Leonard in the last couple games of that Jazz series. And so more so than blaming Doc, I think Tyronn Lue deserves a lot of credit. And actually one of the last conversations I had with Doc before the Game 7 in the bubble against Denver, I remember just talking about the game. And the last thing he said to me before that game was, you know, it's not necessarily fair. And it's just true across every sport, because we were watching, it was just the beginning. If you think about it, the timing wise, it was just the beginning of the NFL season, and the Giants were playing, and Jason Garrett, who had just been fired by Dallas, was hired as the offensive coordinator in New York. And so he's watching the game while we're chatting. And he was just like, man, is that the Dallas coach? I go, yeah, they hired him like 2 weeks after he got fired. He goes, that's crazy, man. I feel like that happens all the time in the NFL, where these guys lose their jobs and there's another position just waiting for them right on deck. I feel like that's not necessarily always the case in the NBA. You know, sometimes you got to wait a few years. He said, actually, that was the best thing for him, was that he had to take the year off when he was fired or let go in Orlando before he went to Boston. And it gave him time to really look at the league and adjust. And then he said something that was really interesting, and I'll always remember it based on what happened. He said that, I don't think it's entirely fair that when teams succeed, the players get all the credit, but when teams fail, the coaches get all the blame. And he's right, because at the end of the day, there's only so much he can do to let Ben Simmons go to the free throw line and go 4 for 14. There's only so much he can do with Joel Embiid having a torn meniscus and having to play through it. Obviously, you want to make adjustments through a series, and that's what Tyronn Lue has done, maybe better than anyone in the playoffs. But yeah, I think that we've seen Doc take some heat, and at some point it was bound to happen just based on the track record.
Real quick, Mark, to your point about the coaches, that pisses me off, because Dwayne Casey was the only coach to ever win Coach of the Year and then to be let go the following year.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Byron Scott. You grew up a Nets fan, and Byron Scott was a part of championship teams and then somehow became this rebuilding coach. He's always now been labeled as a rebuilding coach, whether in New Orleans or his last year with Kobe in LA. It's ridiculous now that like the coaches can never get a true shot at having this type of grace period, where it's like it's always the coaches getting put for the blame, but the players, the superstars, being treated at a certain level.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing shorter and shorter leashes for coaches now than ever before. I mean, we just had 2 coaches this year fired after 1 season, which would have been unprecedented in past years, but it's not the first time that happened. 2 years ago, Igor Kokoskov was fired after 1 season in Phoenix. Then last year, John Beilein didn't even last the full season in Cleveland. So we're seeing shorter and shorter leashes as well with these coaches. But yeah, it's a tough profession. It's a cutthroat business, and these guys know what they're getting into. Byron was my guy. I still remember when I was real little, seeing him at the driving range, and he was just always a good dude. And so to have him around, and those Nets teams were obviously great. So yeah, I hear you, Zach, and you're right. Like, it's just Not necessarily fair all the time, but that's part of the business, and especially in the social media age. So Doc will be just fine. I'm expecting that he's going to want to come back with another vengeance next year, and he's going to do whatever he can to help that roster take them to the next level. They still have a lot of talent there in Philly, and if Simmons is still there and he can get himself right mentally, that could go a long way.
The one thing I really like that the fact that, the Clippers are making it this far is you're kind of showcasing Ty Lue as well too. People kind of forget. Yeah, you won a title with LeBron,
Yeah.
People forget about that. So it's kind of like him jumping back into the spotlight and kind of, continuing that. So, I mean, regardless of what happens this year, it's safe to say his job is safe will be next year, regardless of, if they lose or if they win or not. I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. No, the organization is fully behind him and has been all season long. Even when they were down 0-2 to Dallas in the first round and people were saying, I literally, Zach, I don't know if you were working that game for us or not, but at Staples Center, people behind me were chanting, "Fire Ty Lue."
Wow, already.
This was game 2 of the first round. And now you fast forward a couple weeks later, like a month later, and people are saying he's the greatest coach in the history of the NBA. Now, that's the dichotomy that we're talking about with sports fandom. But if you just stay the course, and I'm glad you brought up winning the championship, what did people say when they won that title? Well, LeBron just carried the Cavs to the title. If it wasn't for Ty Lue's adjustments in that series, who knows if they would have ended up coming back from 3-1. He completely revamped his defense midway through that series to make it a switch all and basically stifle Curry and Thompson and make it as difficult as possible on them. So he deserves way more credit than he's gotten. I think Monty Williams deserves a whole lot of credit in Phoenix and has started to get more and more. There are a lot of coaches that are incredibly underrated that have finally gotten more and more credit as their teams have gotten more success. Even Frank Vogel through his career, up until he was with the Lakers last year, people were like, yeah, he's a solid coach. He's a good coach. Then he wins the title. Everyone, everything changes. And Zach, I think we've talked about this before. In the NBA and especially in the playoffs, things can change in a blink of an eye. I just think about that Toronto run in particular. So Toronto, they get through Orlando, no problem. And then in the second round, they go 7 games with Philly. And in that series, that last 7th game, what happened? Well, Jimmy Butler ties it with 5 or whatever seconds left. Kawhi Leonard takes that corner shot that hits off the rim 4 times before finally dropping. So all in that 4 bounce make, how many legacies were defined right there? Well, Kyle Lowry legacy before that. Everyone said, well, Kyle Lowry can't get it done in the postseason. You can't win with Kyle Lowry as your point guard, your starting point guard. Marc Gasol. Well, there's a limit to what he's going to be able to do in the postseason. Serge Ibaka. He can't necessarily get over the hump. On the other side, for Philly, what if that shot goes off? They go to overtime and Philly wins. Now they advance to play Milwaukee. I would say most people believe they probably would have won that series. So now there's no more talk about Simmons and Embiid. There's no more talk. Brett Brown's probably still there. So that's all affected. Then for Toronto, they go for the next series. They go down 0-2 to Milwaukee. And game 3 went to double overtime. 1 bounce. They're down 0-3. And basically their season's over. And now Kawhi's not talked about as in the same breath that he is, or Kyle Lowry again. We go back to all that. Giannis has now gotten to the NBA Finals. So in the playoffs, so much is determined by small little things that can happen. And so that's the same with coaching too. For Ty Lue, if they lose that first round series, it's a whole different discussion right now. But the fact that he made the proper adjustments, pushed all the right buttons, finally getting some of the respect and some of the looks that he deserves.
I'm glad you mentioned that, how when Kawhi made that shot, and it kind of bounced 4 times before it went in. It could have changed. It could have made strange times for everything. I kind of feel like we're seeing that now. Do you feel like that kind of like weirdest? Like it's not necessarily strange, but I mean, for once we don't see KD. For once we don't see Steph, LeBron.
Yeah.
So do you kind of feel like this is kind of a strange, not necessarily strange, but maybe passing of the torch, maybe?
A little bit. Look, I saw something yesterday, a bunch of tweets yesterday, that one of these players is going to win their first ring.
Yeah.
Paul George, Giannis, Chris Paul, and Trae Young. One of those 4 players is going to have a ring by the end of the season. And think about some of the narratives. Chris Paul, for his whole career, well, there's a limit. There's a limit. He's going to get you second round. He got to the 1 conference finals, but he got hurt. He's not going to be able to get right. So that's been the whole thing with Chris Paul his whole career. And he might have the worst playoff luck of any human being I've ever. The fact that he's in health and safety protocols, despite being vaccinated, is insanity. there's a 1% chance of that happening. And it happens to this guy in one of the greatest seasons he's ever played. So I do feel for him. But yeah, I think that it's good and bad. Of course, at the end of the day, you still want those big teams in there. And I'm biased. I'm from the New York area. I live in LA. So those are the two biggest markets, right? I would have loved to see Brooklyn keep going with KD, James Harden. Can Harden get his first ring? You know, is Kyrie going to be able to come back? Blake Griffin, is he going to be able to get his first ring? So those are all intriguing storylines to me. I wouldn't have been mad if Philly kept advancing because now, okay, what does Simmons look like in a conference finals against Giannis? Yeah. The Giannis thing is very interesting to me. The Phoenix thing is very interesting. But at the end of the day, as I told you, the best thing would have been if we had LA in the conference finals. And that's what we were all hoping for at the end of the day. I still believe it will happen at some point, but credit to Phoenix. They've played really, really well through this entire run. They are a really, really good team. Straight up. They are just a really, really good team. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They've gotten some luck on their side, which is part of the deal in a playoff run. AD gets hurt in the first round. They don't have Jamal Murray to deal with in the second round. Now they don't have Kawhi Leonard to deal with so far here in the conference finals. So obviously luck plays a factor, but they're also just a really, really good team. So credit goes to them. Slightly a passing of the guard, yes. And we've seen some great young performances, whether it be Luka, whether it be Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, all of which against the Clippers, by the way. Then you've got on the other side Trae Young, who has completely flipped how people look at him. So I think that it's been a great playoff so far, just from an intrigue perspective. But to answer your question, if I would have it my way, given the fact I'm from New York and live in LA, I'd love Knicks, Nets, Lakers, Clippers. That would be great. That would be great for me.
That would be great. I know Zach. I don't know if Zach agrees with the Suns being that good because I told him, I was like, dude, the Suns are pretty good. He goes, no, they're not.
Zach. Oh man, I was like, what are the Suns doing? Why aren't they trying to dodge the Lakers? And granted, Game 4, Lakers were up 10 with the third quarter winding down, and then AD gets that injury, and that changed not just the entire game, but that entire series. And I really feel as if we could have been seeing a Lakers versus Clippers had AD not suffered that injury.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if the Lakers are healthy, we know what the Lakers are capable of. If LeBron and AD are healthy, they're LeBron and AD at the end of the day. But that's what made this season so interesting because it was such a quick turnaround. The injuries played a key role in deciding what we were going to see, and that's continued in the playoffs. Think about how many injuries we now have dealt with in the playoffs alone. Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell. Conley barely played in that second round series. Mitchell wasn't 100%. Even Luka Doncic played through pain. Kawhi Leonard now. AD and LeBron wasn't 100%. And really the Lakers, KCP wasn't he hurt too? Didn't he miss at least one game in that series? Yeah. So you're missing two starters potentially for the Lakers. So, and that's just in the West. Then you go to the East. James Harden goes down 43 seconds into that second round series against Milwaukee, and yet they still blow him out in the first couple games. Then Kyrie gets hurt. And what are you going to do? You can't overcome two of your three stars. They almost did, which was the craziest part. But that's the only shame I would say about this postseason. It's been a lot of fun. It's been really cool to see some of these guys make names for themselves, like Trae Young, who has proven a lot of people wrong. But at the end of the day, you want to see the best teams fully healthy going head to head. And we didn't really get to see that to its fullest extent. We still got some great basketball, and we still have a lot to look forward to, which is great.
You know what, Noah? It didn't even feel like we went 30 minutes, but we did. We're trying to do a 20 to 25 minute segment. So I'll close off on this last question.
Okay.
I see you doing obviously those kids sports broadcasts. You've done it with Nickelodeon and you tried it with Bally's. You did that one sample. But obviously I know that's not where your heart is. I'm just wondering, what are your true goals in broadcasting? Where do you hope to end up?
It's a great question. And we've discussed this, that I have interests outside of just sports. And so I'd like to do stuff that's not necessarily just sports. So I don't really know necessarily. I can't pinpoint one thing that's saying if I have that, I'm going to be happy. I love what I'm doing right now. I'm a happy guy as I am. As long as I keep challenging myself, that's my biggest key. Something my dad has done throughout his whole career. My dad's a longtime sportscaster. For those who don't know, has been doing it since I was still an idea in his head. So something he's done his whole career is adding something new, something he has never done in the past. Every single year, at least one thing different. And I'm obviously still young and still early in my career, so that hasn't necessarily been difficult to do yet. But at some point, you run out of things to keep trying. So if I can keep doing something new every year, if I can keep challenging myself every year, that's great. But definitely want to venture to a certain degree outside of sports as well. So we'll see. We'll see where that takes me. I go where the wind goes.
Try some stand-up comedy.
Oh. If you guys want to invite me along, I could see what I can do, but I prefer to sit and watch.
All right. Well, invitation's open.
I appreciate it. I'll see what kind of I'll see what I can cook up. I'll see if I can bring any new content.
There we go.
All right. Well, thank you again so much, Noah. Follow him on Twitter at NoahEagle15, right?
Oh yeah. You got it. You hear Adam say it all the time.
And also I hear that Adam refers to you as the baby goat because you're the next goat in broadcasting. And it's been a true honor, a true pleasure to have you on Fear LA.
Oh, guys, I appreciate it. And I think Adam just says that because it's a short joke, but it could be the other way around. I don't know. I appreciate it either way.